Hey team, I spent some time today going through the dashboard for our SpriteKit projects, trying to find all of the questions that you are asking for your SpriteKit games. And these are the things that you don't yet know how to do or want a little more instruction on how to do. So I've made a bunch of pages, a bunch of examples, and in this video I'm going to go through how to do these different things with SpriteKit. Without further ado, let's get started. I'm going to remind you as you go through these examples, it's a good idea to disable results so that things run a little bit more snappy. This one is all about being able to grab a sprite or tap on a sprite and move it around in the scene. So I can grab these circles and move them to different locations on the screen. So the first thing I did inside my didMove function is I created a bunch of these circle sprites. So I created a circle, made it blue, I gave it a position. I'm using this for loop to give it a bunch of different positions. So for each value of circle index, 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, I'm multiplying that index by 100, nudging it over to the right, and I'm placing it along the screen so that when this runs, I have these 5 circles on the screen. This is also an example of how you can take a node and attach it to another node. You can see that I add the circle to the screen, and then I'm creating a new circle label, and I'm adding that new circle label to the circle sprite itself. And so whenever I move this sprite, the label, because it's attached to the circle sprite, it moves along with it. So the main way I'm doing this is I've created a variable called ActiveSprite, and this is just a node. So I put that up here. And then down here inside touches began, I'm using this regular code for finding the location of a touch. This code right here is something that I haven't shown you how to do, but what it does is it checks the scene and finds every single sprite with the name circle. Up here, I gave the property name the value of circle so that every one is called circle. And then what I do is that for each one, if it contains the location of the touch, then I make the ActiveSprite variable that I showed you up above, I set that equal to the current circle. And then once I do that, this stops going through the rest of the circles on the screen. So you can imagine when I grab this circle, it says that the location of the circle, it's not this one, it's not this one, it's not this one, it's not this one, but the location of the tap is inside of this circle, so this one is going to be the active sprite. And then within touches moved, with this code, I'm grabbing the active sprite using this code, and then I'm setting that sprite position to be the location of the drag, so that as I am moving that around, that circle stays your finger. The second page is very similar. The idea behind this example, if we run the code, is to show you how you could theoretically grab a sprite and move it into a collection. So I create that collection sprite, that's just a rectangle. All of this code is the same as the previous example. I'm setting that sprite to be in the bottom left corner. Inside the didFinishUpdate function, I am getting the selected sprite, so that's the selected circle, and I'm checking if the collection box contains the selected sprite.position. So collection box.contains is a function that just you feed it a point, and it will return true or false based on whether a point you give it is inside of that sprite, is contained within that sprite. And so if the collection box contains that selected sprite, then it removes it from the parent. When I move this, you can see the position is the center of that circle, so it's not inside of that collection box, but once it moves, so it's completely contained, that sprite is removed from parent and it's no longer there. If you wanted to, you could increase the score at this point. The next question that I've gotten from a few of you is how do you keep something so that it is moving only along one dimension? You can see that if I click on this side, it moves to the right. When I release, it stops. Click on this side, it moves to the left. This sprite is only going to go left and right. I've done that by defining these two variables, vertical speed and horizontal speed. I'm using this in the next example as well, so that's why I defined both of these. I made a sprite, which is this rectangle, and that rectangle, player sprite, nothing special with it. Here's what I'm doing. Inside touches began. If I'm touching all the way over on the right-hand side of the screen, only if I'm touching all the way over here, set horizontal speed to positive 100. If I'm over on this side, I set the horizontal speed to negative 100. And that's all that happens inside touches began. Inside did finish update, I'm setting the horizontal velocity, the dx, to be the horizontal speed. The other thing that I'm doing is at touches ended, when I release the touch, I'm setting that speed to be 0. And that just makes it so that when I'm clicking, it moves. When I release. The next example is just one more way to do this so that it moves right, it moves left, it also moves up, and it moves down. And it's only moving in one of those directions at any one time. And I'm doing that inside touches began with a bunch of if, else, if. So location.x is greater than 400 means the x coordinate is over here, it moves right. If it's less than 150, now same behavior as what you saw in the last one. If the y coordinate is greater than 400 up here, instead it sets the vertical speed to be 100, and if I'm at the bottom edge, that means the y coordinate is below 150, vertical speed is negative 100, and then again, every time I release, the horizontal and vertical speed go to 0. Next thing is to make it so that you have a sprite that moves all on its own back and forth. The player sprite code is the same as what I had for constrained movement 2D, this example right here. The difference is I'm making a sprite, I'm giving it some properties, I am giving it a physics body there, and inside did finish update. If the enemy sprite position is greater than 400, or if it's less than 150, I'm multiplying the enemy sprite speed by -1. That just changes the direction. It was going to the right, then it's going to the left, or if it's going to the left, flips it to the right. And then I am setting the velocity of the enemy sprite equal to that value. So when I run that, you can see that the enemy sprite just goes back and forth between those two extremes. And because I don't have any of the physics rotation turned off, mayhem ensues. But you can see when this is going, it just goes back and forth, back and forth. Now this next one uses all of that same code, but this time you have a moving enemy, and I want to make it so that when my player sprite collides with the enemy, that ends the game. This involves a contact event. So I define an enemy category and player category. If you're wondering what values to use here, I was completely random. It doesn't really matter what category you want to use, except you may not want to use just all zeros, because that's actually the default category, I think, for sprites inside SpriteKit. So what we do is we add that category bit mask on the player sprite, we make it player category, and then I am interested in knowing when the player sprite contacts anything with the enemy category. So those are the two properties I have to set on the player sprite. For the enemy sprite, I have to add in a category bit mask and set it equal to the enemy category, which just means that this red sprite is what I want to count as the sprite that is the enemy. And we go all the way down to did begin. This code we use to check and see which sprites have collided or contacted each other. I define a category that is when the player category contacts the enemy category. And then I just have an if-then statement. If the contact that has just occurred from body A and body B is the contact that is defined by a player category contacting enemy, that means that the contact type that has just occurred is the player contacting the enemy. If that happens, I want to remove the player from the game. I am creating a game over sprite, just an SK label node. I'm putting it in the middle of the scene, and then I am adding it to the scene. So that's why when this runs and the player sprite collides with the enemy, you get that sweet game over and the player disappears. Another thing some of you are asking is, how can you make it so that when you tap, you have a sprite that actually moves to a particular location and then goes back when you release the tap. So this is what I've set up here. You can kind of see when I click, it jumps to the location of the click and then goes back to the center. And I've also made these other little sprites in here. I create a ball sprite, I give it a physics body, I put it right in the middle, I add it to the scene. I do a similar thing, I add 100 of these little sprites. I'm just putting a bunch of blue circle sprites on the screen between 300 and 400. So that just puts these sprites on the screen. Inside the touch's began function, I have a location of the touch, and I am defining first a move away action. And this is an animation that moves a sprite to the location of the touch from wherever it is and does so in 1/10 of a second. I make a second action, again an animation, this is a move, and it's going to go back to the center. We're going to go back to the point 250, 250, which is in the center of our scene, and that's again 1/10 of a second. I want to sequence these two moves together. I want to move away and then back. So I'm going to put these together into a sequence, and then I'm going to run this sequence on the ball sprite. And so that's what you see right here. That's all it takes. The final thing, some of you are asking how you can actually make it so that you create items and have them appear on the screen in random locations, but have them within a specific range. And so I have done that. I'm getting a random number, random integer between 300 and 400. I'm turning it into a CG float, and I'm setting the result of that calculation to be the position in X, and I'm doing the same thing with Y. And so this creates this little square from 300 to 400, both X and Y, where it creates these random points. The other thing that I'm doing here is I am collecting these circles. In this one, I'm using a contact event to determine if that ball sprite has collided with the blue circles. So I've created a category for the ball. I've created a category for the blue circles. I have added the category of ball category to the ball sprite, and I am interested in knowing when the ball category contacts sprites with the blue circle category. Down here, I add another line that adds the category bit mask of blue circle category to every single one of those blue circles. And now the code inside did begin is almost exactly the same. Figuring out what are the two categories that have just collided. I define the category of the ball contacting the circle using this OR operator, and then I'm just saying if the contact that has just occurred is the ball contacting the circle, I have to figure out which body is the blue circle. And so I use if body A name is blue circle, it means body A is the blue circle in that collision. So I remove it. I also increase the score, and I update the score of the game based on that new value. And if body B is the blue circle, which is just the other situation, I do the exact same code. And so now when this runs, if I tap, you can see my circle is passing through all of these points, and if there is a collision, a direct collision between those, it collects them. As you can see, I've collected all 78. It gets to be a little snappier again when you disable results. And so this is almost like Hungry Hungry Hippos. I'm going around, I'm collecting all of these. There it is. So fun. 99, 100. So I hope this helps you as you try to do those things for your games that you've had trouble doing up to this point. Let me know if you have questions. Good luck. See you next time.